this lesson is about constructors in a class. So what is a constructor? Constructor is a special type of method of a class. Normally a class contains properties and methods. A constructor, special type of method. And we know every method should have a name. So for a constructor, the name of the constructor method is same as that of the class name. So if my class name is employee, the constructor method name also should be employee. And a normal method will have a return type, void display details. Void is a return type that tells that it is not returning anything. But a constructor method is not having an explicit return type. So the major difference between a constructor and a normal method is a normal method should have a return type, void deposit or boolean withdraw. So that boolean and void are the return types. But a constructor, two things. The name of the constructor is same as that of the class name, and it should not have an explicit return type. If you write the return type, then it becomes a normal method. The fourth point, a constructor is used to initialize the member data of an object, the purpose of a constructor, to give the default values for the member data of an object. And when a constructor gets executed, a normal method, if you see, that get executed whenever it is being called by an object. So emp dot display details. So emp object is calling the display details, that time it will get executed. And a normal method can be executed any number of times, can be called any number of times. But a constructor is called when an object or an instance of a class is created. And every time, so whenever you create an object of a class using the new keyword, at least one constructor is called. There may be a possibility that two constructors also may get called through constructor chaining, but for sure, one constructor will get executed at any cost. And the constructors are of two types. One is called as default constructor or zero argument constructor, and constructor with arguments or parameterized constructor. User defined constructor and compiler defined constructor, that's what default constructor. So what is basically a default constructor? Compiler defined constructor. See, just imagine we created a class or we return a class account in our program. And we have not defined any constructor with a method with the name of the class, no return type, we have not written. So when you compile that program, Java compiler will create a constructor of its own. That constructor is called as the default constructor. Java compiler provides a default constructor at the time of compilation by default if no constructors are written in the class. So if there is no constructor in a class, compiler automatically creates a default constructor. For example, I written a class called employee or a class called account. So this, we have not written any property or any method. Then we have got, when you compile this program, it creates employee.class. And in that employee.class, it will create a class file. It contains not account, it should be employee constructor. It will have employee. So this is mistake. So it will have employee constructor. So we will see practically. So let us create a class. So inside our edit plus, I write a new Java program with the name of account. So creating a Java class with the name of account, no main method also. An empty class, and I save it as account.java. Account.java is a program. So let's compile this program. dir in the previous lessons employee.java, employee.class, and we compile this Java C account.java. Account.java we compile. Remember, there is no properties and there is no methods. If you want to see, it has got account.class. A bytecode file is being created, and if you want to see the contents of that, Java P, Java profiler, and you just provide the name of the class. It will show you whatever properties, what all methods, what all constructors are there inside a class, it will show. I press enter. Java P is nothing but Java profiler. When you see the Java class, no contents are there available inside. But when the program is being compiled, class account compiled from account.java. But what is that we can see? We can see a constructor account without having any parameters. So constructor, a special method of a class. Name of the constructor method is same as that of the class name and no return type. So this is a constructor. And when it is created at the time of compilation, compiler created that. That is called as the default compiler, a default constructor. So Java P, when you say Java P employee, this employee class also have got a constructor. CMPNO, name, salary, this constructor, but we have not defined that constructor. We were having only main method, but the compiler have created a constructor. So this main method return type is void, but employee, a method, no return type at all. So that is what we talk about a constructor. So the mistake here is, it should be class employee or the constructor will be employee. Now one example when we see, you see we got a class employee. Class have got three properties, EMPNO, name and sal. We defined a constructor, you see, a method, a special method. Name is same as that of the class name, no return type. If you provide the return type void employee, then it becomes a normal method. I just return some star, system.out.println 5 stars, used to initialize the member data of an object. And it has got a method, normal method, display details. So display details is a user-defined method, a normal method, but this employee is the constructor. Why it is called as constructor? A method. Name of the method is same as that of class name, no explicit return type. So when this method get executed, whenever an object of a class is being created. Now what we do is, we'll have constructor test. In this constructor test that contains employee class also, constructor test main method creating three objects. New employee first object, again new employee second object, new employee third object. So whenever you compile this program, Java C constructor test.java, you compile it. Compiler will create constructor test.class as well as employee.class. And when you run this program, Java constructor test, if I press enter, what happens? The control will come to the main method. Then the first line of code is employee emp1 is equal to new employee, creating an object. So when we create an object, a constructor method employee with no parameter, this is also employee with no parameter. A constructor gets executed automatically whenever an object of a class is being created. So first line. So that time control will come to the constructor, and in the constructor 4 lines of code. The first line is system.out.println of star. So we are getting the value star, first star. Then EMP1's EMPNO becomes 101. EMP1's name becomes Sachin, and EMP1's salary becomes 2500.0. That is happening in the memory. It's not displaying anything. Now the next line of code, again object creation. So what will happen? New employee, it will call the constructor. It will display this, and EMP2's EMPNO name and salary become same. So we'll see the output is star. Then the third also object, constructor is called. So from this we can understand a constructor will get executed automatically whenever an object of a class is being created, and it is used to initialize the member data. 3 objects are created, automatically it is calling the constructor. We got this. Now emp1.display details. So what happens? It will call this display details, and EMPNO name and sal of emp1 will be displayed. Then the second one, emp2.display details, again this method will be called, and we are getting the value, and then the third object is also calling. So we are getting these values. This is what? Constructor. Let's see this practically. So in our Eclipse, already we got class employee. So what I do is, I'll take this one and we write or we create a separate program. New, same program, a Java class, constructor test. Constructor test. Main method we have. Now already we got this employee.java, a separate program. So in that employee.java, what changes we do is we provide in the place of set properties, we just define a constructor. For our understanding, I just write sout system.out.println some 5 stars. We are giving 5 stars. So empno is equal to 101. So emp name, in the presentation it was name, we given it as ename. Ename is Naveen and salary 5000. 5000.0 will be assigned to that. So this is what we talk about the constructor. Zero argument constructor. Zero argument constructor. So in this case, we define the constructor, so compiler will not create a constructor of its own. Now the main method I am removing from here. Let me have the main method. So we defined a class here. So class employee, constructor and display properties. In constructor test.java, create 3 employee type objects. So employee emp1 is equal to new employee, the first employee object we are creating. The same way the second employee object, we are making a copy of that second employee and the third employee. So 3 employee objects we are creating. So employee.class, employee class and constructor test.class. Let me run this. What will be the output? 3 times 5 stars are being coming. From this example, we can understand whenever we create an object, this constructor will be called. And each object can call display properties method. So emp1 dot display properties, emp2 dot display properties, and emp3 dot display properties. Now each object properties also run as Java application. We are getting the value. So this is what we talk about constructor. So 2 type of constructors. One is default constructor, 0 argument constructor, but not this. So what constructor created by the compiler is called as default constructor. And the compiler will create a constructor only if no constructors are available in the program, in the class. So here compiler will not create a constructor. Whereas for constructor test, compiler, when it is being compiled, it creates the main method as well as it creates a default constructor. Hope you are clear with this one. Happy learning.